Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more courage or to be a better leader, then do we have the Leading with Emotional Courage show for you. Today I'll be talking with Peter Bregman, the best-selling author of 18 Minutes, an Inc.com Top 100 leadership speaker, and the author of a brand new page-burning book, Leading with Emotional Courage. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about how to have the hard conversations, create accountability, and inspire action on your most important work. That, plus we'll talk about butchering fiction, choosing mountain bike colors, the importance of laughter numbers, early bedtimes and orange juice, almost killing people with a tennis racket, and what in the world Uncle Ralph has to do with anything. So welcome, welcome back to the show, Peter. Are you ready to shine?
I am. Thank you so much for having me. It's a lot of fun to be here with you.
Thank you so much for being here, and a mighty woohoo! So before we dive right into things, we've had you on the show before, so can you give us a brief Peter Bregman 101?
Sure. I feel like everything, the Peter Bregman 101 is everything's been leading up to this book. And it's, if you've heard me before, you've read any of my books, everything. I'm not a guru from on up high that, waxes wisely about my perfect life and then, go back up to it after, I've taught you something. I struggle with all the things that everybody else struggles with. And emotional courage is something I've sort of always struggled with and have learned a lot about recently. I grew up in New York. I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I'm a skier. I teach skiing now. I used to be a ski racer. If you read the book, you'll see that I was a mountain biker, and I'm not sure I could call myself a mountain biker anymore, but I still like to bike. I run a company that I've run for the last 20 years focused on helping leaders show up powerfully and CEOs. I'm an advisor to CEOs and their leadership teams, and helping people gain focus and follow through in the work that's most important to them. So this is just sort of another book in that journey, and it feels like it's the culmination of everything I know at this point.
Well, it's an awesome journey, and I love how you share. I was talking off air. We're sharing. Both of us are sharing from our life experiences, which means down in the muck and mire. Here's what I'm learning from that. But I think that actually has the most genuineness, authenticity, and therefore trustability to it. As we dive into things, who is Anne Bradney, if I'm pronouncing that right, and what'd you learn from her?
Yeah, Anne Bradney, who is one of the people I've dedicated the book to and who taught me a tremendous amount in this area. She runs a school, an institute called the Radical Aliveness Institute, which runs out of LA. And she's kind of a remarkable woman and teacher of mine. She sort of grew up in core energetics, which is a somatic therapy. But the underlying idea is things happen to you in your life. You repress them, they get stuck in your body somewhere, and it's energy stuck in your body. And what you need to do is move a little bit. You got to move that energy, and you have to feel the things that you were unwilling to feel when you were younger. So if you think about, I could give you some of the background of kind of what it might look like in people's lives, which I'll do in a second if you want. But Anne Bradney is a master teacher of this kind of modality. And I just, not by mistake, without pre-knowledge, like without knowing what I was doing, I joined a 5-day program that she ran maybe 10 years ago that a friend of mine said, you got to meet this woman, Anne Bradney. She's really great. And I did without knowing what I was getting into. And as people have said now about programs they've gone to that I run, I never would have come had I known what was going to happen, and it's the best thing I ever did in my life.
Oh, with that segue, what happened?
Yeah, well, so let me I'll kind of share some background about what happens to us as people, right? And that might give some context. But and in the book, there's some stories about some of the things that happened in there. But what happens is, look, you're a kid, right? You're a toddler. You are fully expressive and creative and open and in your true self. And you do everything that you do with passion and abandon. And at some point, your caretakers want you to stop, right? You do something that scares them or worries them. They could be in their own heads. They could be worried about you and really kind of thinking what's best for you. but they say, no, you can't do this, and you can't act this way, and what you're doing is making me uncomfortable, and they stop. And then you have this natural reaction, which is you push back against that. You're enraged. Like, it often creates rage. Before it creates shutdown, it creates rage, right? And those are this sort of what we call these terrible twos, and where people are reacting to being stopped, right? I have this life energy that's going out there, and you're stopping me? No way, no! Right? I'm going to fight back. And that really scares our caretakers, and they shut us down fast. And I know this because I'm a parent of 3 kids, and my oldest is 16 and my youngest is 11. And I see this, like I could see where I've done this with my own children. So it doesn't come out of a bad place. It doesn't come out of like, mean, evil parents and caretakers trying to, make their kids submissive. You're really looking out for their best interest, but this is the impact. The impact is the kid has self-expression. You shut them down. The kid reacts to that shutdown. That gets shut down. And now here's the thing. At the point at which this is happening, your life as a kid, your life is truly dependent. This is a life or death issue, is dependent on your caretaker, right? If they reject you, you will not get the basic needs you need met in order to survive. So what you learn very quickly is to show up in a way which pleases the people around us. Right? And we call that the mask, right? You learn to put on a mask, and your mask is incredibly useful. It's still useful, but it's incredibly useful at getting what you want and showing up the way you want the way other people want you to show up that pleases them so that they'll care for you. The problem is we lose our sense of when it's useful and when it's not. The mask becomes a habit, and then we slowly lose our sense of who we truly are. And along with shutting down maybe some of that angry energy, we're also shutting down all of the positive, passionate, full of life energy, and we become shadows of ourselves. We become slim versions of ourselves that isn't fully alive, right? And so the path to reclaiming the fullness of who you are, and by the way, I do this work with CEOs and leadership teams, and I don't always talk as openly about it in this way because I want to speak to the language of the audience, but I'm speaking in a very transparent way about the dynamic of what happens. So, what happens is, in order to reclaim that, we have to feel a lot of things we didn't want to feel, right? I think if I speak my mind, I don't know if you will reject me. And if you reject me, my child brain still thinks that rejection of me is life-threatening. When in reality, A, you might not reject me. You might actually enjoy the fullness of who I am. And B, if you reject me, I'll be fine, right? I'll be okay. And so we have to relearn that. We have to relearn to reclaim parts of ourselves. And we're going to feel all sorts of things in the process, right? First of all, we may feel inexplicably the rage and anger that we don't know where it's coming from, but we feel it. And that's coming from these places where your rage and anger got pushed down when you were really younger, and it stayed there. And, it's amazing because I've watched people's bodies change as they go through some of this work, right? Because you're literally like someone who's walking hunched over suddenly isn't as hunched over, who has a limp, who doesn't have a limp. And it's not magic. It's like the body is holding these hurt, wounded places, and when you're able to express yourself, they no longer need to be contracted in the way that they're contracted. And so it's really, I've been talking a while, so I'll pause and give you a chance to get a word in, but it's, this work is really, really powerful work. And Leading with Emotional Courage, the book, is very much built on the foundation of all of this work, and I learned the foundation of all of this work from Anne Bradney.
Woohoo! So let's go from there, and we'll talk, since I've got mountain biking on the screen, and I seem to have mountain biking on my mind recently. I don't know why, but you talk about in chapter 1, the high cost of conformity and how to avoid it. And why did you keep mountain biking after quite the aerobatic event?
I flipped over 3 times, hit my head on a tree with a helmet, but was really bruised up, as was my bike. And I got back on my bike and I kept riding. And And I didn't keep riding, by the way, because, oh, that fall was an anomaly. Like if I fell like that skiing, because I'm a very accomplished skier, I could kind of claim that with confidence. I would get back up and I would ski and it would be appropriate, right? Whatever reason I felt like that, it wouldn't be because I was in over my head. It would be because of something, I don't know what. But with the mountain bike, I'm not such an accomplished mountain biker. And I was over my head. And I kept biking for another hour. And I kept falling, by the way. I didn't stop falling. And it's not because I'm particularly courageous. It's actually the opposite. It's because I'm particularly wimpy. And I was biking with a group of people, and I didn't want to be that guy who was like, I'm sorry, this is above my ability, and I really can't do it, and I got to go home, and maybe you have to babysit me, or maybe I'll just wait on the side for you to pick me up. Or like, I just didn't want to be that guy. And so I couldn't separate my needs from what I projected onto these other people would be what they would think of me and what their needs would be. And I just kept doing what the group was doing. And it could look to the outside world like a lot of things look to the outside world, like confidence, which is actually insecurity. So if you think about arrogance, people who are arrogant, they're not confident at all. They're the opposite of confident. So it reads sometimes like it's overconfidence, but in reality, it's underconfidence. It's insecurity. And what's happening is when I'm arrogant, I'm trying to prove all the time how great I am. And I need to be better than you. And I need to be better than anyone else. And that's not confidence, right? Confidence is not needing to be better than anyone else. Confidence is having enough security in myself that I could be wrong, that I could not know things, that I could fail and keep going in whatever it is I need to keep going on when it's appropriate, and stop if it's appropriate to stop. So that lesson really taught me something, and I ended up in the emergency room. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but thank God everything was fine. But this lesson taught me that I need to grow. You know, the book is broken up into confidence in yourself, connection to others, commitment to purpose, and emotional courage. And I needed to grow more of my foundation in confidence because I was making poor choices based on going along with people when really that wasn't the right thing for me.
Thank you. And since you used the word foundation, your next chapter is about finding the ground. Now, you found it on the mountain bike. I found it many different ways. But what can you tell us about finding ourselves or connecting with ourselves? Because this seems essential to finding our confidence.
So I'm a big proponent of meditation. I meditate a couple of times a day. And it's a great way to find yourself because, no matter what happens, you're always there, right? Until you die, until you're not. This is the motivation part of the conversation. You've got a short amount of time in order to accomplish all of this stuff and to sort of show up fully as yourself, right? You have a short amount of time to find yourself and be yourself in the world, so don't waste it. That said, sometimes we don't know who we are. And sometimes who we are gets defined by our accomplishments or our failures or the people around us, their projections. There's so many ways. It is so easy to lose ourselves in the reflections of other people in society. And we do it all the time. And by the way, the more successful you get, the worse it is because the more projections you get put on you. And then you try to live up to those projections. And it's hard not to live up to those projections. You kind of want to be those projections. Sometimes you've branded yourself as those projections. And so to have a couple of times a day, I'll tell you what it is for me, to have a couple of times a day to just sit and do nothing and fulfill no expectations except for my own of just sitting. And for me, I focus on a mantra, but to focus on a mantra. And for years, I focused on my breath. I didn't focus on a mantra. But whatever it is that you're doing, and you find that there is some solidity sitting there. There is some self there. In Buddhist meditation, you kind of work to finding the no self. And maybe that's the next level. I haven't gotten there yet. But at least I have found sort of a little bit of a steady self. Maybe the Buddhists would call it my witness. But it's I've found a sense of self that rises beyond any success or failure. It rises beyond what people think of me. And in fact, this was tested yesterday. Yesterday, I did a webinar.
Mhm.
It was my first webinar on this book, Leading with Emotional Courage. And honestly, it was terrible in my view. I haven't gotten any feedback on it, but I could tell you that it was not at all to my expectations. I felt like I babbled. I felt like I was not clear. I felt like time got away from me. I just was really disappointed. And, maybe 10 years ago, that would have happened to me. And I would have relied on that disappointment in order to, get better next time. I would sort of say, oh, I'm so mad, and it would throw me. And maybe I would be hesitant to do the next webinar. Or maybe I would stress myself out like crazy in order to prepare for the next webinar so it never happened again. Let it serve as motivation. But I finished it, and I texted someone who I'm close with, and my text was, that sucked. And because it really did. And she said, what about it bothered you? And I said, these are the things that I think I could have done differently. And I didn't lose myself at all in it. It was really interesting. I just breathed and I said, that to me was a failure. I did a poor job. I had set an expectation. I didn't live up to my own expectations. I have another one in 2 hours. So what do I want to do differently based on what that learning? And I was so clear and centered, and I went back and I completely rewrote it.
Yeah.
And 2 hours later, I did another one with a slightly different focus. But I loved it. I was like, great. That was great.
Woohoo.
And I went to sleep really happy. And I went to sleep happy not because, I finally did a great one, but I went to sleep happy because whether I did a great one or whether I did a bad one didn't for a moment change my sense of self. And that's the goal of how we should go through life, because then we could take really big risks, right? And really kind of push the edges of who we are and who we can be.
So many directions we can go with this. I guess the first one is self-compassion, because you had to, if you ripped yourself to shreds, which I'm going to raise my hand here, guilty as charged. In my earlier days, I would have set the bar high. Even if I almost reached the bar, I was still going to tear myself down. That's not going to help you to rebuild. So you had to access that inside of yourself to get or stay in that centered place.
Right. Exactly. That's exactly right. And it's there's things I have compassion for myself and things I don't as much, but I've really learned to grow my compassion. And here's the thing too about all of this stuff. It's developable. Like all of the stuff that we think people either have or don't have, it doesn't matter, because you can have it, meaning you can develop it. And one of the things that I noticed about myself, and it's true for a lot of people, it could actually work both ways. Mm-hmm. But there are some people who don't have compassion for themselves, but have compassion for other people. I tended to be, there are also people who have no compassion for anybody else because they don't have compassion for themselves. And you'll know, which one of those two you are, or there's obviously other options, like you actually have compassion for yourself and other people, or maybe you have compassion for yourself and not for other people. That's a little narcissistic. And that's just part of, narcissism is just part of who we are. And that's in certain situations, that's kind of how we would show up. It's not to slash that one just because we've got a label for it. But it's about, for me, it was interesting to say, if someone else had struggled in the way that I just struggled, how would I respond to them? Yeah. And I would respond to them with kindness and compassion and listening. And so then I was able to say, well, great. Why aren't I doing the same with myself? Why, would I lose faith in them because they slipped and fell? No, I wouldn't lose faith in them. I would help them get up. Right. And so why wouldn't I do the same thing for myself? So it helps. And I talk about this in the book a little bit. It helps to find places in your life where you're already doing the things that you want to do. And it might be towards other people. It might be towards other areas of your life, and learn from that, because that proves that you already have the capability to do it. Yes. You just may not be applying it to yourself when you need it.
I love that, the act of taking inventory of what's working. I want to go, you'd mentioned another term in this discussion about yesterday's webinar, which is risk. And so I want to talk about, we're going to jump way ahead in the book real briefly to a dear friend of yours, see how I do on his name, Jim Wolfensohn, and fencing at a national championships. What can you tell us about this?
So Jim was an Australian student. He was pretty poor. And he was at the University of Perth, I think. I can't quite remember, but he was at university. And the fencing team had one of their players got sick. And it was a strong fencing team. So one of their fencers got sick and was not able to go to the national championships. If I'm remembering all of this correctly, I think it was the national championships. And they could not go without a certain number of team members. So this friend of Jim's said to him, "Hey, will you come to the national championships with us and be on the fencing team?" And his response was, "Are you mad? Like, I've never fenced in my life." And they said, "That's okay. We need you. Like, we need a living, breathing person to be on our fencing team." So he went. And, like I say in the book, it would be a great story if he won every match and became... he lost every match. He did not know how to fence. But he had the time of his life, and he learned a tremendous amount. And he ended up joining the fencing team, and ... he ended up being on the Australian Olympic fencing team from all of his hard work because he was engaged and he was passionate and he loved it. And that's how he lived his life. He eventually came to New York. He was an investment banker. Mm-hmm. He started his own investment bank, and he eventually became the president of the World Bank, Jim Wolfensohn. And he's a remarkable man. He's still alive today, and he's a friend of mine, and he's a remarkable man. And what's interesting is, had he assessed it, this is actually teaching me something as I'm even speaking, had he assessed the opportunity mm-hmm. based on whether I think I'm going to succeed at this or not, he never would have done it. In fact, I would argue he never would have done most of what he did in the world. When he was president of the World Bank, his mission was to eradicate poverty, right? If he thought, well, what's my likelihood of success in this mission? He would probably say, it's not worth it. I'm not going to take the leadership role and do it. But that's not the question he asks. He asks a different question, which is a question I think we should all ask, which is it worth the risk? Like, is it worth the risk? Not will I succeed, but is it worth the risk? What will I get out of it? It might just be enjoyment. It might be I'll learn something. It might be connections with other people. It might be any number of things. Is it worth it? And if it's worth it, then great, I'm going to try to succeed. But if I don't succeed, that's fine too. And I think we make ourselves smaller when we try to only make choices that are likely to succeed.
I love it. And you've got me thinking about the Rae Series that now I'm probably going to officially sign up for, because if I balance it based on, could I do really well, that's not really the game for me. And I don't need to prop myself up by my performance, but it's really all of these activities are what can we learn from them.
Yeah, and I also think, it's interesting for me too, because one of the things that I've been thinking about doing is I already do a master level coach training. It's a 5-day coach training that I run. It's a lot of fun, but I've had requests and I've been thinking about starting a training for coaches from scratch, like get your certification and you start from not being a coach to eventually being a coach, which is a bigger deal. And I've been tossing it around. And one of the things I've been thinking about is, do I think it will succeed? Meaning, do I think that it's the kind of thing that people will come to and that people would want to get their certification? There's lots of other programs out there. And I think that's the wrong question. Like, I think I myself have been, this is what this conversation makes me realize. It doesn't mean I should actually do it, but it means that the question I should be asking is, what is the risk? And it's not just a question, it's a project, meaning it's not just what is the risk, it's how do I minimize the risk and maximize the payoff? And then is it worth that minimized risk and the maximized payoff? So how do I do it in a way that would most likely make it worth the risk? That's the question that we should be asking also. And that's maybe the question you should be asking, around the race.
And that is exactly in many ways what I've been doing, running through different scenarios and what could take place and what does that look like and what do I hope to gain out of it and is it worth and so forth and so on.
And how do you impact it, right? Because you have an impact on that. And so it's like the choices that you make will impact that. It's great.
Absolutely. So let's go from there. Let's talk just a little bit. We're going to dive back into the early section of the book in a minute, but it's near and dear to my heart. Due to past books that we've written and such. Tell me about taking small personal risks and being barefoot in shul.
So, for those that don't know, Shoeless Synagogue, and I go to a really great synagogue in New York. It's called Romamu, and it's it might be considered a little crunchy granola, but there's a lot of singing and it's a really great community. And I'm also I have been, I'm not now, but I have been on the board. So at the time that I tell this story, I was a little bit of a visible person in the synagogue. And it was Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year. And I grew up in an Orthodox synagogue where everybody's like, when I got bar mitzvahed, which is the ritual of a Jewish boy becoming a man at the age of 13, I wore a top hat, right? And very formal thing like this. It was a very, very formal synagogue. And so I was praying for Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day of the year. It's the day of repentance. And I kind of wanted to take my shoes off. And I wanted to be barefoot. I wanted to feel my feet on the ground. It was just more comfortable. I wanted to really, there's a long history of removing shoes for respect, but there's also a long history of like being well dressed in synagogue. The gentleman sitting next to me, who I've since become friends with, was dressed to the hilt, like pocket square and tie and suit and really, well coiffed hair and very genteel looking. And I thought to myself, can I really do this? Can I take my shoes off? I mean, I knew I had nice socks on and I knew my feet didn't smell, but still, like, it could be offensive. And I had this moment of trying to decide what to do. And I'll tell you where I went in a second, but the important part is that moment. I don't want to rush that moment because that is the moment that we hit so often in our lives, right? I want to do this thing. What will other people think? What will other people think of me? Should I do it? Do I have the courage? That's the emotional courage moment. Am I willing to feel what I need to feel in order to do this thing I want to do? And yes, we have to care for other people, but I didn't know if it would be offensive to him or not, right? I was making assumptions about what might be offensive to him. And I was making assumptions about what might be appropriate. And I didn't know, I didn't know whether I should do the thing I wanted to do or not, or whether I should conform and do what the people around me were doing. And it's such a great moment to not rush past, because that is the moment that every risk presents to us. And so to move slow enough in a small risk like that, in order to then feel all the feelings that come up, and then to cross that line in a very conscious, intentional way, allows us to have an experience. It's an emotional courage, muscle building experience, to have an experience of in the face of all of these emotions, acting powerfully. And even with a small thing like taking my shoes off. So I felt everything, and I felt the nervousness, and I felt it. And there's a couple of questions that I always ask myself, and I suggest people always ask themselves, which is, what am I feeling, and where am I feeling it? Right? What am I feeling is really important, because it's our feelings that stop us from doing things that we want to do, right? If you think of a hard conversation that you're not having, it's not because you don't know how to have the hard conversation, or because you don't have time, or you haven't had the opportunity, or you don't have the skill. None of that's true. You've had plenty of hard conversations in your life, and you're perfectly skilled, and you have plenty of time. So what is it that holds you back? right? What is it that holds us back? And it's that we don't want to feel something. We don't want to feel the disconnection or the conflict. We don't want to feel what might be shame or embarrassment or their defensiveness or our own defensiveness, or we might not want to own what we might have to own in that conversation. There's all sorts of reasons of things we don't want to feel. And so we don't have that important but hard conversation. And if we're willing to feel everything, if we're willing to feel all of those things, the embarrassment and the shame and the defensiveness and the conflict and the disconnection and all of that, then we can do anything. Then we could walk through all of those feelings and take the risks that we most want to take. And I suggest you start with small things like taking your shoes off in synagogue. And the way it ended, by the way, is I did take my shoes off in synagogue. And the man looked at me and I could feel the judgment oozing from his skin, which was entirely my projection. Because he then bent over and took his own shoes off. And we became friends from there. And I said to him, wow, let me tell you the experience I just had after synagogue. I said, let me tell you the experience. And he said, I when you took your shoes off, it gave me permission to take mine off. And he goes, not that I needed permission. I could have done it any time, but it kind of gave me permission. And it was such a lesson about the worthwhileness of taking risks and the assumptions we make about the people around us.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. On that note, you and I share a theme. It's not my only theme for the year, but it is a big theme, and I keep this on my desk because of it. And it's got the green screen glowing through it, but maybe you can still see it. A turtle, which is reminding me to go slow.
It's great. Yeah, it is so tempting to move fast in our lives, and it's it really came home to me when I think I tell this story in the book. If I don't, I'll tell it now anyway. Which is that I was at a dinner with my family. Daniel was around 6 years old at the time, and the waiter was taking our order, and then something called him away. And he left in the middle of our order. I tell the story in the book, right?
Conference call. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So the waiter interrupts our order. He says, "Excuse me, I got to go. I'll be back." And Sophia, who must have been 8 or 9 at the time, said, "Where did our waiter go?" And Daniel, my 6-year-old, said, "I think he went to take a conference call." And I for a minute I didn't know what he was talking about, and then I realized, oh my God, this is his experience of me. His experience of me is interrupting things in the middle in order to go do something I need to do. Mm-hmm. And that is not the experience I want my children to have of me. It's not the experience I want anyone to have of me. It's not the experience I want to have of myself. And so it's really it's one of those things where it says, okay, I need to slow down and I need to what am I rushing to? What am I rushing for? I'll get to things I need to get to. And when I look at the end of my days, I mean, the end of my day, not the end of my days, but the end of my day, which I try to do every day and say what worked and what didn't work, right? This came from my book, 18 Minutes. I'm wrapping up your day with 5 minutes to just say what I learned, what I want to do differently or the same tomorrow. It's indispensable. I really highly suggest that everybody listening to this take 5 minutes at the end of their day to look at their day and make some decisions about what they enjoyed and what they didn't enjoy, and then bring those learnings into their next day. I mean, it's unbelievable. That more than anything teaches us how to live our lives. And so at the end of the day, I look back, and one of the things I evaluate myself on is how grounded was I in how many windows did I have open on my computer? Right now, there's one window on my computer, and it's you, and everything else is shut off. And I know from experience that even if we were doing this interview, mm-hmm. and an email came through, even though I know I'm not going to be able to answer it, I would glance over at it to see what it was. That doesn't help. That doesn't help us get connected. That doesn't help me, relate to you. It doesn't help me show up for the listeners. It doesn't help. And so I've really been working on trying to slow down. One of the other things I try to do is never do anything when I'm eating except for eat. I could talk to people, but talk and eat. And that's hard to do if I'm alone, right? To just sit and eat. And yet it's really powerful. I enjoy my food a lot more too. So slowing down feels important. And if we slow down enough, we might start to feel things, which, by the way, is why we often don't slow down. right? We often don't slow down. We often move fast because there's things we don't want to feel. But those things we don't want to feel are controlling us. And that's why we end up, watching television while we're eating and then eating 5 times as much as we needed to eat in the first place, or doing something else because we're not willing to feel the things that we need to feel. And some of them are hard to feel, but freedom is in that feeling.
Woohoo! One of the things that you do that I do as well, and I can't say I'm fully successful, though I work like the dickens at it and I will improve, is once we come basically to sundown on Friday night to about sundown on Saturday night, I try to be off of my work. I can't say fully off of the computer, but off of my work during that time, which helps me to be able to feel, which helps me to step back and get out of the paradigm of myself so I can see more big picture.
It's really hard to do. I really struggle with this also. It feels really important to take time away from all the screens and technology. I failed this last night, but I currently have a list. I have a kind of a checklist of things for myself that I look at the end of the day and say, did I do this? Did I eat, whole foods, mostly plants? Did I, meditate twice today? Did I, eat 1 plate of nourishing food and not more? Did I, stay focused on each of the tasks? Like something to just remind me this is how I want to live my life. And one of those things is, did I get off screens by 8 p.m.? And that's hard. Like last night I worked till 10:30 because my book's out and I've got a lot of stuff. But those aren't excuses. Those are just reasons why I need to get off screens even more, right, at a time like this. And so it's really hard, but it's amazing what happens when you take the screen off the table, literally and figuratively. When you say, okay, it's not an option to spend 10 minutes, on a screen, which will end up being 2 hours. I'm just not going to spend any time on the screen. And that opens up, that's a breath of fresh air, almost literally, that allows you to stretch from that. If you haven't made that commitment, then you're never really stretching. Your space is still confined in some way. So and that's true for me. I mean, other people might not, have that need in the same way that I do, but it really helps if you take some of that stress off the table.
I literally went back last night and I, so far I'm a holdout. I'm actually smartphone free. It's crazy. It's been a challenge for our social media, but I'm on this box so much that I want to be off of the portable box. But I went back starting last night. I do a process of journaling called automatic writing in the mornings. And I got yesterday, look, we've got to improve the end of the day for you as well. And I went back to setting alarms last night to help me wind down, to help me get to bed, to force me to extricate myself from the work. Because when it's your own business, how do you delineate? Actually, I wasn't planning on going there. Tell us about your candles.
Oh, yeah. So I don't always do this, but just full disclosure, but I'd like to do it more. But it's like creating rituals. So the idea came from actually the Jewish Friday night Sabbath, where the interesting thing about Shabbat, right, about the Sabbath in Judaism, is that it's a delineation of holy time. So in a lot of religions, holiness comes with space, right? So you walk into a church or you walk into a synagogue, and that becomes holy space. Holy time, which is what in Judaism, the holidays are all centered around time, right? Sundown to 3 stars in the sky. It starts when the sun goes down and it ends when there's 3 stars in the sky. It's usually a 25-hour holiday. And so you have to have some way of delineating holy time from mundane time. And the way you do it in Judaism is you do a ritual. You create some kind of ritual. You light candles. You do what's called kiddush, which is a ritual with bread and wine. And you mark off, we are now in holy time. We're not going to do any work. We're not going to light fires. We're not going to use our technology until we do another ritual at the end. Because if you don't demarcate that time, then 1 minute bleeds into the next. But if you create a ritual, it doesn't. So I've been really thinking about this and working on this around work, right? Which is when I'm going to work, right? And this is what I talk about in the book, lighting a candle that says work is now starting and then blowing out the candle when work is ending. And it's a way of demarcating time, because otherwise every minute bleeds into the next. And, especially when you can carry your work with you in your pocket, or you can't because your iMac probably doesn't fit in your pocket. But it's this idea that we're always traveling, we're always accessible to work, which means that we never demarcate the time. And I think that's for a lot of people, for myself certainly, a stressful place to live. And it's really useful to create some kind of ritual. And this is where I think a candle works well, or something like that, that helps you to clarify, I'm in my work mode. And then most importantly, now I'm not in my work mode.
Awesome. From there, I want to double back to something you talked about earlier. It's from your last book, but you mentioned the list. If we get just one thing out of this, the list at the end of the day, are there a few more things on that list that we should think about or should be asking ourselves about for the day?
Well, I think the list should be, I'm just pulling it up right now, which is why I'm looking here, because I have it on my phone. But I think the list should be very personal to you. So I've used other people's lists. I've looked at other people's lists. I've tried other people's lists, and those aren't the things that I needed. So what I've done is, over time, I've created a list. Here's what I've done. I've created my own list of, these are the things I think that leads to my happiness and fulfillment as a person. And the list, and the way I got to the list is I created what I thought the list should be. And then at the end of the day, I decided whether I was happy or not, like whether I felt good at the end of the day or not. Right. And the goal was to feel good. Right. That was my goal.
Yeah.
And by the way, feel good doesn't mean feel happy all the time. It could mean feel sad, but feel good. Like, sad is perfectly valid as long as it feels real and connected. Right. And actually feels good to feel sad. It could actually feel really, really good to feel angry, as long as it feels connected and in the right place and in the right way. And so over time, and I still modify it, but over time, I could tell you what the things are on my list. And what I want to say is, you could try these, but you could also try the things that would be on your list. And most of the things on my list are things that I have a little bit of a hard time with. So some things that might really be important to be on your list is not a problem for me. And so I don't put it on my list, because I know, like, exercise is not on my list, because there's not a day that I won't exercise. I don't have to worry about it. I know I'm going to exercise every day. So I don't need that, on my list. So for me, I have morning meditation. I just wrote these as shorthand for myself. Whole foods, plant-based.
Yep.
1 plate or bowl per meal. Afternoon meditation. In bed for 8 hours of sleep. No sugar, no flour, no food or screens after 8 p.m. No TV unless exercising. A clear daily goal. An on-time and unrushed presence. So that's how it's those things that I evaluate myself on at the end of the day, and saying, did I do these things? And if all of those things are marked done, I could almost guarantee you that I will end the day feeling pretty good.
Woohoo! What one homework assignment would you give people today? If I took off my coaching hat, I put it on you, Peter. What one homework assignment would you give people to help them to build that courage muscle and to build their own leadership muscle?
So I would, why don't they add to their list if they're going to create a list? Yeah. Did I take a risk today that scared me but didn't kill me? Right? And if it killed them, they're not going to ask the question anyway. But the idea is, every day, to ask yourself, where is there an opportunity to take a risk that might scare me but won't kill me? And to go slow when taking the risk. So the idea isn't just jump off the cliff fast. It's to jump off the cliff slowly and feel everything you feel and still keep moving. Because that is what, move slow. And that is what builds your capacity to act in the context of these inevitable feelings. And the more you do it, the more you'll be willing to do it, because it is a muscle. It does grow like a muscle, like a physical muscle in the gym. And the more you do it, the more you'll continue to do it. And then the more you will open up your freedom to act.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. On that note, what advice would you give parents to help their kids today?
That's an interesting question. There's nothing harder that I do in the world than parenting. Like, it's by far the thing that's made me grow the most. It's by far the thing that's challenged me the most and made me, look clearly at what works for me and what doesn't, like who I really am and where my challenges lie. So, I think what I would do, I mean, I did this with my son the other day. We were throwing a boomerang.
Yeah.
And we were throwing it in this area, which kind of kept hitting a building. And he said, and I said, you might want to throw it in that other direction, but there's a chance that it will end up in the marsh. Right. And so you may either have to go back and get it in the marsh or you may lose it. And he's like, do you think I should do it, Dad? And I said, well, I want you to stand there and think about it. Mm-hmm. And when you're thinking about doing it, tell me what you're feeling. So immediately he looks at me and he's like, Dad, like, I know, no, just do it. So I said, what are you feeling? And where are you feeling it? And he's like, I feel nervous. I'm like, well, what does nervous feel like? And he said, I feel like butterflies. And I'm like, great, where do you feel the butterflies? And he said, oh, I feel the butterflies. And he pointed to like his chest. I feel the butterflies in my chest. Okay, so feel that. And I said, that is what taking a risk feels like. And it's a risk. It's a risk. You might lose your boomerang. It might end up and you're totally a choice. Like you could decide to take this risk or not. But if you take the risk, you'll figure out whether you can get this boomerang all the way around and back in your hand. And if you don't take the risk, you'll never know. But you can't take the risk without that feeling. So feel it. And he goes, okay. And I'm like, okay, you want to throw it or you don't want to throw it? And he said, I want to throw it. And I'm like, all right, let's do it. 1, 2. And then I go, hold on. What are you feeling right now? He's like, Dad, stop. I was like, okay. All right. So I want you to feel it. I want you to know you might lose it. I'm trying to up the risk factor. And then he did it. And it worked. And it came back to him. And he was like, yeah. And I'm like, that's great. And sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. But taking that risk, how do you feel? Was it fun? He's like, yeah, it was really fun. And I think the more we can playfully help our kids learn what learning is and learn to take the risks that might scare them but not kill them, which expands their capacity to act in the world. And also to help teach them which are the risks worth taking and how they know if a risk isn't worth taking. Like whether they're doing something because he was always a choice. I didn't say you got to do it. I didn't say I'd be proud of you if you did it. I had no judgment. And I said, I have no judgment. I don't care if you do it. I just want you to I care that you make the decision and that you go slow enough to feel whatever you feel.
Woohoo! So I've got to ask on that note, we both seem to be into color with our watches here. Very good. We've got the smart watches with color. Band. Yep, I've got my red band going here. What color bike did you go with?
It's a good question because I just bought a new bike. And I actually went back and forth again this time. But it was so interesting because the story I tell in the book is really having a hard time making a decision, going back and forth and returning it and really having to learn to have compassion for my indecisiveness around this. And I don't know why it was so difficult for me. And this time I sold one of my bikes and I bought a new one. And it was
I've got to ask.
Pretty much the same. It's a Brompton. It's pretty much the same. But I was trying to figure out, what color, and it's a folding bicycle, and also like what color seats, or titanium or not titanium, and you save a little bit of weight and all this stuff. And it was really interesting because I was looking at, I narrowed it down to this black one and this orange one. And I kind of really liked the orange one. It was an orange black edition, a Brompton. It was a really nice looking bike. And my kids really wanted me to get that one because I sort of have a little bit of a thing for orange. And mostly it started because I started buying orange bags because when I bike in New York City, I want to be able to be seen. And so I thought, I could wear one of those delivery person vests, which I wear sometimes. But also if I just have a red backpack or a red messenger bag, an orange backpack or orange messenger bag, that doesn't. So anyway, I went back and forth and I almost bought the orange one, but it didn't feel right to me yet. And so I thought, I'm not going to rush this. I'm actually not going to rush this. Like, I'm going to be okay with not knowing yet. And I didn't. And then I went back to the store and I looked at some bikes. And this bike that I'd seen beforehand and I really didn't like the first time now caught my eye. and it's made of raw lacquer. So it's this kind of grayish green look, but all of the solders were in gold. It was like really like the raw lacquer. It's a couple $100 more because they have to really they have to do it with a perfectly built bike, because you can't hide imperfections with paint because it's the raw lacquer. And I looked at it and I was like, I kind of like this one. And it just felt like the decision was right. And then I thought it would look really good with a leather Brooks saddle. So I got this leather Brooks saddle. And that's the bike that I bought. And sometimes I think back and like, oh, that orange one would have been fun. And I knew I was going to disappoint my kids because they really like the orange one. But it got me. This is probably a longer answer than you were hoping for. But
it's perfect. You're going with heart.
Yeah. And it got me to this place where I was like, it felt really, really good to get to a place where it's like, I didn't berate myself, and I was compassionate, and I took my time, and I came out with a choice that I really like. And that's the one I ride now.
Awesome. So on that note, where can people go to find out more and to find your beautiful book?
Leading with Emotional Courage. It should be, certainly it's on Amazon, and you can go to Amazon. We have information about it on our website, which is Bregman Partners, Bregman partners.com. And then you go to the resources tabs and books. And then you can click on Leading with Emotional Courage. But also, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, 800 CEO Read, all of those places should have it. And thank you also. I really want to say, like, this does feel to me like world-changing work. It feels really important to me. It feels like, you and I had this conversation earlier, but it feels like my most important work. And it's like, I want to live in this world. I want to live in the world in which people are confident in themselves and connected to each other and me, and committed to things they care about, and courageous emotionally. And so I'm doing like what I can to build that world. And so like the interest that people take, I want to thank you, and I want to thank your listeners, because like the extent to which you're interested in this and want to step up to it, it creates a world that I think is a really beautiful world to live in, and the one that I'm hoping to create around me. And so that's where you can find the book, Amazon, and other places.
And if you didn't catch BregmanPartners.com, come on over to InspireNationShow.com, and we'll also get you over to BregmanPartners.com as well. Resources tab under books. So before we dive into a really brief meditation, this has been a lot of fun, Peter. We could go on and on and on and on. So I want everybody to go out and get the book. Do you have any last words of wisdom that you want to share with people today?
I guess the quick one is, it's worth it. If you're sitting there going, should I do this or should I not do that? And it's a little bit of a risk. It's worth it. And it's worth it to feel. Feeling is kind of painful, but it can be kind of painful. But even the things that you think are painful, when you start to actually feel them, aren't so much. And, or they might be, who knows? But what I do know is that your willingness to feel is deeply connected with your ability to have confidence in yourself and connection to others and commitment to purpose. So it's worth that and feeling in and of itself is worth the risk.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So do you have a brief meditation you wouldn't mind sharing with us then?
Sure. Let's find your either feet on the ground or your seat in your chair, or both. I actually do this at a standing desk, so my feet are on the ground. But either way, feel your feet on the ground. And if you're willing to shut your eyes.
As long as you're not driving.
As long as you're not driving. Yeah, exactly. And take a deep breath and allow the exhale to be a little longer than the inhale. So just take a deep breath. Take a few of these deep breaths in through your nose. You could even breathe out through your mouth. Settle your body. Do a quick scan, maybe starting from the top of your head. Do a quick scan down your head, down your face, your eyes, your nose, your mouth. Breathing out tension, your ears, your neck, your chin, your shoulders. Breathing in and out, slightly longer exhale than inhale. Feeling your arms and your hands, your back and your stomach, everything just relax with every breath. Your pelvis, your seat, your legs. Feel where there's contact between you and a chair or you and the floor. Your legs all the way down to your feet. Now, feel your feet on the ground. Even if you're sitting, feel your feet on the ground. And if you're driving and your eyes are open, just feel your feet. Notice everything about your feet. Notice where they touch. Notice how they fit in your shoes. If you're wearing shoes, if you're barefoot, notice how they touch the floor. Notice what kinds of sensations you might feel. Maybe there's a vibration or tingling. Maybe there's a part that you feel particularly, the heel or toe or an arch. Just feel everything you feel. And now I'm going to be silent for a few moments, but keep feeling what's in your feet and see how that feeling changes. Just notice. Does it go? Does it move in some way from one place to another? Does it disappear? Does it get stronger? I'm going to be silent now for a few moments and just notice what happens. Your mind's wandered from your feet, bring them back to your feet. Keep noticing the sensation in your feet. Now, with your eyes still shut, we'll do one more. Is do a very quick scan over your body and notice if there's any particular sensation that stands out to you anywhere in your body. It might feel a little bit like a pain. It might feel like a ball of energy. It might feel like vibration. It could feel like anything, but any particular part of your body that just seems to stand out from the rest. And do the same thing we just did with our feet to that part. Go to that part, breathe, relax around it, and just notice everything you notice about it, including how it changes. I'll be silent for a few moments. And bring your focus back to your breath. Take another breath or two. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And that's just a taste of what you can do any moment you feel something. Take a moment and just notice how you are not that thing. In English, we say, I am angry, and it creates no division between us and our emotion. But in a lot of languages, you say, I have anger, and that's a much better way of thinking about it. So if you feel something, kind of notice what you feel like and where you feel it, and focus on it a little bit, and you realize that it's just a sensation in your body.
Woohoo! This has been brilliant, Peter. I'm so glad we had you back on the show. I'm so thankful for your work. I absolutely love this book, love what you're doing, and love that you got back on the horse after yesterday's webinar.
Thank you. I really, really so appreciate your support. And it's an awesome podcast that you run. So thank you for creating the opportunity.
Awesome. Maybe someday we'll have to get together and go for a ride or something.
I'd love that as long as it's within my skill level.
It goes for me as well. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get leading with emotional courage, and begin strengthening your courage muscle today and shine bright. Woohoo! Awesome, Peter.
Oh, so great. Michael, thank you. You're a great interviewer, and it's a lot of fun. It was a really nice conversation.
Awesome. It was a beautiful conversation, and it had great flow to it.
Yeah, I felt it. And it's fun because every time like great interviewers like you have a conversation about book, I discover things about the book that I kind of enjoy discovering. So I learn new things myself every time, which is really fun.
That's cool. When I hear that, it means I've done a good job. And so thank you.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirernationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!